that. I love that. And that actually leads right into this next question. I loved this statement that John Eldredge said in his book. He says, life needs man to be fierce and fiercely devoted. The wounds he will take throughout his life will cause him to lose heart if all he has been trained to be is soft. I mean, that what we've been discussing right here just totally validates that statement completely. And you obviously see in your work where men weren't allowed to be fierce. And when he says fierce, it's not meaning an unhealthy, violent fierce, correct? And then they've lost their direction in life. So you're distinguishing between unhealthy is when it's hurting relationships. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay.
And a healthy definition of fierceness is cultivating a relationship, protecting a relationship.
Yeah, being that protector. Totally being that protector. Yes. I love it. I love it so much.
About that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like one of the biggest fantasies that men have is that they will make the winning shot in a basketball game, or they'll make the winning touchdown in a football game, and it is kind of about winning, but that's not why it's the fantasy. It's because they did something different to save their team, or to lift their team above a certain level so that they could be victorious. Mm-hmm. It's all about protecting. It's all about being that fierce warrior. That's what men fantasize about all day long. That's why they watch sports. They kind of live out those fantasies by watching other men do it. It's not about a ball. It's about who they are.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. And he mentions in the book too, I thought this was really powerful, that we need men that can go through the trenches of like a D-Day and fight for us and fight for our country. And Jeff, I'm curious, that's not what we're breeding in these younger boys in this generation. Like you mentioned that the football coaches are saying, I'm having to teach these boys aggression because their aggression has been shoved down. When I read that statement, I kind of was a little bit fearful, like, we do need men to stand up and be men and protect us and protect our country and to protect civilization. And we are taking that away from them. I imagine the long-term effects of that is going to be devastating.
Right, and it's totally because we're not understanding what makes men truly happy, and we're kind of emasculating men and not understanding their divine DNA or anything. And there's a great book. It's called Nation of Wimps, and it talks about how this idea that everybody gets a trophy and that type of thing, and especially with men, I want you to know, that's not a good thing for men, because all of a sudden they come from a childhood of everybody getting a trophy type of mentality, and then they become 18, 19, 20, and they start entering the real world where everybody doesn't get a trophy, and guess what? They don't know what the heck to do.
Yeah.
And so we have what's called failure to thrive syndrome, which means, failure to launch. And that's kind of like a fun term for people who are just not ready for the world.
Yeah. That's interesting. I just met a couple months ago with a gentleman that is working. He kind of has a membership for men like I do for women. And he mentioned that exact same concept that you just said, that failure to launch. He has another program where he takes the boys that are, 20 plus years old that are still living in mom and dad's house. Yeah. Yeah. Trying to teach them how to be men. And, I'm sad. I'm sad that I didn't recognize and know what emasculation was and how women use emasculation to try and gain their own power back if they feel like they've lost any power. We're going to talk about emasculation in just a minute. I'm glad you brought that up, because honestly, the women that I've worked with, they don't know what they're doing. It's kind of been inbred in us as well. It's how society has created it. It's how society has said, this is what you do to control your man. This is what you do to get what you want. Or to, like you mentioned earlier, we compare them to what a woman would do. And we speak different languages. We need to embrace them for who they are. Before I get into that, though, I have to mention this one last thing. I loved how he talked about the creation of the earth, and that God has a wild side. He created the lions and the tigers and the snakes and the sharks and all of this. I mean, he's like, he goes through that whole analogy, and I'm just sitting there going, oh my gosh, this is so true. And then what does he do? He creates all this, and then he says, and it is good. It is good. What do you feel about that? How do you feel that resonates with how he created men, and it should be good?
I also love that, description of how men need adventure. God is adventurous. And one of the best things that help men kind of tie into their masculine soul is to bump up against those boundaries that nature provides. I just took a really good friend out to Tui. I don't know if you don't know where that is. It's the north rim of the Grand Canyon. Elder Holland did a Mormon message called Rome.
Oh, yes. Okay, yes.
Yeah, you can drive all the way out to the north rim, and there's some pretty intense hikes where it says, the only rescue is self-rescue, and 5 people died on this hike last year. And I took this guy who he didn't have a father growing up, and he had never slept under the stars. He had never been on a hike that actually didn't have he'd only been on hikes that were paved. He'd never been on a trail that, was really rugged. There really isn't like a sure path, you know what I mean? And I took him on this adventure, and it was amazing. He felt so liberated. And that's one thing that men need and boys need, is they need to bump up against those boundaries that nature provides, to be able to see a grizzly bear, or, be in the water with other aquatic life and so forth. It wakes up and stirs the masculine soul. And there was a great book by Drs. John and Julie Gottman. And it just came out last year. And it talks about, the many, many, many hours of research they've done on men. And what they found is that men and women handle uncertainty different. Men charge into uncertainty if they have confidence, if they have been cultivated. Women actually have a more tendency to kind of hold back. And this is just general, broad sense. It's not saying that all women respond that way and all men respond that way. But men, they crave that experience of uncertainty. Or, that's what I love going to TUI for. We're going to go that way, and hopefully we'll get there. And if not, we'll just find a place to camp and keep trying tomorrow,
Yeah.
She can't handle that. She wants to know exactly how long that trail is, and the adventure is not knowing. That's the part that men love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. I'm having all these scenarios come to my head with my 4 sons. We've had a lot of adventure in this house. I mean, I guess part of me has to be a little bit proud of myself that I have allowed my boys to be boys, because I grew up with a dad that was very much a boy. So I'm super grateful for that. So, you know, when you get a call saying the police at your house because some neighbor away called because your son's on the roof with his scope checking out deer down in the fields, and they thought that I was a terrible mom for allowing my son to crawl up on top of my roof to check out the deer. And I'm like, he could be out doing such worse things, for heaven's sakes, you know? And that's where I was like, I can't keep taming him. I can't keep taming. He is an adventurer. He's totally all about the adventure.
Yeah.
And the adventure's normal. It's normal. And we need to let these boys embrace it. And like you said, God wasn't, he's adventurous. I mean, for heaven's sakes, just look at all the Bible stories. You know, parting of the Red Sea, the Egyptians, he comes in at the last moment to the rescue. I love how, you know, John Eldridge paints all those pictures in his book. It's awesome.
And John Eldridge, like, the other thing he does a good job of is he makes sense of fear. That men kind of like, they will charge into fear, but as a society, we're being driven by fear. You know, that's why the cops showed up, is because someone was afraid.
Yes.
You know, and we're being taught, like, oh, if you're afraid, just don't do it. You know?
Yeah.
But men define themselves by leaning into the fear in a healthy way and conquering it.
Yeah.
That's what the adventure is.
Yes, totally. Totally.
And moms extinguish that in their boys and their husbands by, you know, basically saying, yeah, don't do that because it's too scary. You might get hurt. Yes.
And chances are, I mean, we've had lots of super glue, stitches, few broken bones. I mean, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And they just have cool stories to tell and awesome scars to prove it. So
yeah, and it's kind of like, that's the collection of their manhood. Those type of experiences that, you know, they bumped up against those boundaries. And, you know, obviously there's some boundaries that you shouldn't bump up against, but, you know, that's the man's spirit and soul, is to see how far they can go, see what they can create. You know, we're kind of talking a lot about, you know, the masculinity with sports or the outdoors, but it's also very masculine for men to want to create and to compose music or to create art. You know, they're pushing those limits too. Like that's leaning into fear just as much as a hunter who's, you know, hiking around the mountains every day trying to shoot a bear or something. Like a musician is trying to create music or perform music in a way that is pleasing to other people. It might please them and it might not. Either way, it's really scary.
yeah.
So I don't want to suggest at all here that, you know, masculinity is rigidly by going, you know, swimming in a shark-infested ocean, or it can be just as much found in, you know, speaking or composing music or creating art or something like that.
Yeah.
It's basically leaning into fear is the masculine heart. Protecting others from danger, masculine heart. And that manifests itself in so many different ways.
Oh, I love that. It's so true. I love that. Thank you for clarifying that. I agree with you that you can have that masculinity and go into all different, you know, choices of what feeds you, and it's pushing through that fear. I'm sure there's some boys that are, you know, they're in high school or whatever, and maybe they've always loved something that was more in the arts. There's probably a fear there to admit it.
Totally.
You know? Yeah. So that's awesome. Okay, so now let's move a little bit more into women with their husbands. The first question I had for you on this one was, in your work with men, what is one thing you feel women do wrong that causes men to seek for acceptance elsewhere? Is there something that sticks out in your mind? I mean, obviously, we've talked about emasculation, and you're welcome to keep moving forward on that, because my next few questions kind of cover emasculation is obviously probably a big one. So what are your thoughts on something that we as wives might do that cause men to seek acceptance elsewhere?
So the number one thing is they try to change them. They're constantly pointing out their flaws and so forth, and they just want to change them. And one thing that a favorite quote of mine is by Gordon B. Hinckley. It says, "Critics don't contribute and cynics don't create." And I just love that because in marriage, women sometimes they feel like they have a blank check or a green light to change their husbands, and we joke about it all the time, you know, like, oh yeah, my wife is my better half, or as if men are stupid or something.
Yeah.
It's not true. Women who try to change their husband, what they end up doing is they do feel very lonely because they don't feel like they're being, you know, championed. And the other book that John Eldridge has is for women. It's called Captivating, and it talks about a woman's spirit, you know. And what I'm saying now only makes sense when you kind of have those two kind of paradigms put together. But men fantasize about being the one that makes the difference, and if you're always being critical of what they're doing, they stop putting themselves out there. I remember one day I was at my son's soccer game, and it was like a tournament or something. So we were there for like the entire Saturday, and so we were sitting down in the grass as a family, and there was a family next to us, and we were eating our lunch, and this woman was just, I felt humiliating her husband, just ordering him around like he was just this servant or something. And she didn't even give him a chance to help. Like, you could just feel the contempt that this man felt. I mean, it was humiliating for him. He was doing it. He was dutifully doing everything she said because that's what makes her happy. But it was totally just cutting him down, and you could just feel it. And I obviously didn't know these people, but I guarantee you that if he's not already, at some point, he is going to go and get that feeling of, hey, you're great. You can do things from somewhere else, whether that's, you know, addiction or secret life or something like that. But, you know, when women are constantly like going like that, it totally basically sends this message of, you're failing, you're not doing it right. And nobody likes that message, men or women. But it especially has this effect on men that they stop trying.
Yeah.
It motivates them to keep trying to please you. Men want to please their families desperately. But sometimes women, they feel like you can only please me if it fits in this little box.
Yeah.
And it blinds them. It blinds women from actually what their husband is trying to do to please them. So that's the number one thing that I see that women do that totally dampens the male soul, which is they try to control and change them instead of embracing and understanding their differences.
Yeah. And, you know, Jeff, I was one of those women. I did what I watched and what you see. I mean, you look at the sitcoms and you look at a lot of our movies and how they portray the woman to be the smart one and to know what's going on and multitasking and getting everything done, plus being the high-powered lawyer, and the husband has the, you know, dumb, stupid job, and they make him look like a dork all the time, right? I mean, you see it in our society so plain. And, you know, kind of like we talked about earlier with the kids in school, and that there's almost this hidden agenda of switching those roles, totally emasculating men, trying to empower women. But all that does is create two weak individuals. That doesn't create one more powerful than the other. And when I started learning this information for myself, and applying it to my marriage, it was a game changer. It was a complete game changer for me to, instead of criticizing him, giving him the admiration and appreciation that they look for and they long for, because they do want to provide. They're all about providing. And if I can get women to understand the one thing, and just one thing, is you speak two different languages and he is not a version of you, and who gave you the nomination that your way is the only right way to do something?
Right.
Can you tell I'm passionate about that?
Yes. Yes.
I don't know how we got nominated that. Where, I mean, do you know? I mean, I know that I've read books that back when men all had to go to war and the women had to pick up in the workforce and had to start taking over everything at home while men were at war, and then they came back, but the women all of a sudden had this view of what it feels like to go accomplish something and be like given attention for it, and like and recognizing themselves like, I can do this, I don't even need you, I can do this. That is, I've read books that's kind of where it stemmed from. Do you know of any other resource, or I mean, where did we get nominated as women? Why is our society nominating women as, you got to control your husbands, you've got to save and civilize them, your way is the only right way, they don't know how to load the dishwasher, you've got to teach them how to correct them?
Well, and a lot of it's because women, you know, they have that internal DNA, or that divine DNA they're the best at relationships. They understand relationships, but men do as well. Men have a very key part in relationships, but and women are better communicators as well. So because women are so much more articulate than men, they can actually kind of get that across more. And just because they have that talent doesn't mean men don't have talents and things to contribute. And men and women can work together, but we don't need to dampen each other or put the other person into submission to make it happen. Fun story that I always kind of reflect on in my own marriage. I've been married for 17 years, and Emily and I have 4 kids. And early on in our marriage, one Sunday, Emily asked me to make a salad. And the way I make salads is, put some lettuce and put it in a bowl, and it's done. So I made the salad, and she just laid into me. She's like, you didn't peel any carrots into it. There's no raisins. There's no Chinese noodles. There's all these things. And I'm just like, all of a sudden I failed, and I would have been happy. And this is what I told her. I said, honey, I would have been, if you would have told me to make a salad with all those things in it, please ask for that. But if you just say make a salad, I'm going to make it my way. Mm-hmm. And don't be critical of that. Mm-hmm. Happy to make it your way if that's what you're asking. But men just want to know how to please their wife. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes what they try to do, women, it doesn't fit in that box, and they just kind of cut it. And it really, what it does is it kind of demotivates men to keep trying to please. So
yeah. And that's something we talk about a lot, that criticism does kind of suck the life out of men.
Yes. And
appreciation and admiration is like jet fuel for them to just launch forward, provide more, protect more, want to give you more, love you more. And I mean, I've watched it in my own marriage. It's the craziest thing. Because for women, criticism works. It works between women to women. So we figure it should work on men. It's like I often will tell women, I'm like, if I were to say to you, to a woman that might have a pink shirt on, I don't really like your shirt, she would never wear that shirt again. But if I was to say, Jeff, I don't really like your shirt, you would look down and go, I kind of like it.
Right.
You know, it does not change you. It doesn't change you.
Yeah, and that's my wife and I have kind of a running joke. Like, I love wearing Levi's, and I don't know how to match my clothes. I truly don't care. And I had at this time, all the time actually, I have white socks that I just love, these white socks because they feel good on my foot, and I would wear them regardless. Like, I would wear my white socks to work every day, and it made my wife so mad. I kind of said to my wife, I said, "Look, honey, I don't know what we're gonna do here, because I'm not gonna change my socks, and because I like them, and I don't really care what other people think."
Yeah.
She's like, "But it doesn't match."
It drives us crazy.
And I'm like, I don't care.
I love that. That's such a great example of how we work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in your work, what do you see the long-term effects are of a woman that continues to emasculate their husband, that continues to try and take their power away, make them feel less than they are? What's going to be the outcome?